So welcome everyone, lovely to see you and great that you could join us live. The replay will be available for you to catch up on, so if there's any little gems in there that you don't you forget or that you want to go back to, then I will share the replay in the Facebook group. There's the words I needed. Bethia, what's she saying? I am with the family. So no, that's fine, Bethia, don't worry, it's all good. You can keep your video off. So yeah, today our session is with Sam. Sam is one of the senior trainers on the UK Hypopressive team. She's got a wealth of knowledge. I'll let her do her proper introduction when we switch over. But so Sam's going to lead the session talking about diastases and her campaign to get a postnatal check for every newly postnatal woman. Let me just switch over. And then Sam. No, that's not it. Total technophobe. Post. Right. I'm just switching over to Sam.
Yep, I'm here.
You're here. Brilliant. Great.
Great. Okay, well, it's really nice of Nikki to have asked me to come and do this. It's something, as she said, I'm really passionate about. I've been a women's health coach, women's health specialist for about 10 years now. I used to be a journalist, but I was living overseas in Singapore, and I decided that it was difficult to work as a journalist over there. So I've always loved running, and I've run 8 marathons, and I love sport. I was always going to be a PE teacher if I hadn't have been a journalist. And so I thought, why don't I just do what I always wanted to do when I was a kid? So I trained as a personal trainer, and then a Pilates instructor. Good to see a reformer in the background there, Lorraine. Yeah. And I'm not that trained. I'm a mat work Pilates instructor. But I brought it in because I felt that I was working more and more with mums, postnatal mums, and being a PT wasn't enough. I needed to have something that would help them recover, and I needed a better knowledge. So I did a pre and postnatal qualifications, and then decided to train as a matwork Pilates teacher. I had never even done one Pilates class in my life, but it seemed like a good idea at the time, and that has become the bulk of my business. And then I felt there was a gap, if you'll excuse the pun, in my training, that I couldn't quite fix mums who had abdominal separations. And I started to work, well, I'd been working for some time with a mum who was an ardent runner, and she would not stop even though she had a bad diastase, and Pilates just wasn't cutting it. And then one week I was checking her and I was saying, well, it's held together. What have what's changed? And she went, oh, I've been doing hypopressives off the internet. And this is in Singapore. And I went, what? Never heard of it, So I went and did my research. I literally got on the next course. I got on a flight home the next time I saw that Nikki and Richard were doing a course, and thought, yeah, this is what I need, because it held my clients' abs together like nothing else had, whilst we've been trying to do the Pilates, and she was insisting on doing too much heavy pressured stuff. And so I started to introduce that into my training, and it has become a huge part of what I do, and the rehab work that I do now with people. So yeah, big fan of hypopressives. Rehabbed myself after I had caused myself a prolapse, having pushed somebody's broken down Land Rover Defender into a petrol station where she'd run out of petrol. Didn't realise it was a Land Rover Defender when I offered to help, as I was paying for my petrol. And all these men were watching, waiting for me to fail, and my stupid pride wouldn't let me. And so I gave myself a dual prolapse. I knew I'd done it instantly, used the hypopressives to repair that, then had a hysterectomy later, about six months later, not related to that. Used the hypopressives from 2.5 weeks because I dared, because I was so familiar with it. My recovery, even my surgeon said, was much more like keyhole surgery. I'd had a full abdominal incision and everything removed. So for me, hypopressives is this amazing tool. It transforms my work. It makes me stand out from other people. And I've got the medical people taking note, and that's a big deal. So it's trying to get that message out there. And that's what we're trying to do with raising awareness about diastasis. And I love that people amongst UK hypopressives who aren't fully aware of it are asking those questions as well. So I'm going to try and share my screen. Now, I'm not techie. My daughter usually comes to help me do that. Can I try and do it, Nikki? Just give me a moment. I want to give you, I think this is right. So hopefully this is the right one. So I'm going to share this. There's no sound with it, so I don't think I need to share. Well, I'll put it on just to be on the safe side. So you should be able to see can you see my
diastasis?
Yeah, can you see the picture of the diastasis? Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, so that's good. So
Crude.
Sorry. So what we've got here is a good set of abs and a not so good set of abs. Okay, I'm just going to mute someone. It's all right. They've gone quiet. So what I want to explain to you briefly is what a diastasis recti is, or an abdominal separation, to use its more common name, more familiar name, and how did I get it, or how did anyone get it? I discovered mine when I was 14 years postnatal with my fourth child, training to do my postnatal and prenatal courses, and that's when I discovered I'd got one. Even though I had all the red flags to have one. I'll explain about that in a minute. So there's two very graphic pictures here. One's rectus abdominis muscles in their correct position, and the one next to that is when you have a separation. Now, I think this is quite a kind picture, because actually some of the women I've worked with, they've got even larger separations than that, but it just gives you a very quick visual of what it looks like. So abdominal separations are very common during and after pregnancy. So it's when the uterus stretches and in the abdomen to accommodate the baby. So with the relaxing that's in our body to help with the growing uterus, the muscle relaxation, the muscles give way a bit, and then we're putting them under a lot of pressure there with a growing baby, and also with carrying on doing our normal stuff. So that can cause the muscles to separate. The muscles will separate anyway to grow the uterus, but they can separate sometimes beyond what we mean them to separate if we overdo stuff. But also there's a connective tissue issue. That's really hard to say when you've had a glass of wine. So connective tissue issue means that sometimes some of this is hereditary. So you might find that your mother had the same thing, that you have inherited the same kind of connective tissue that she has, and there can be a repetition there. So a greater likelihood of it because of the kind of connective tissue, the fascia that you have. One study found that up to 60% of women may experience DR during pregnancy or postpartum, and yet we still do not incorporate a check for that in our postnatal medical checks, even though it's easy to do. You'll see in a minute just how easy it is to check for it. And then the danger of that is many women go back to exercise absolutely oblivious. I had run 5 marathons before I even knew I had a diastasis. So somehow, because my muscles were quite strong, I managed to hold it at that 2 centimetre separation. But with other women, if they don't know they've got that separation, it can get bigger, and that's the danger. So I've just recently launched this campaign called For Crying Out Loud, which is a campaign for the introduction of diastasis checks as part of postnatal care. Now, at the moment, if you've had any clients who've recently had a baby, you'd have had the conversation about how poor the postnatal checks are currently. And I work with a lot of GPs, so I'm really careful not to criticize them. It's actually, and I'd never use the word poor in front of them. So language is very important when you're talking to medics. But the problem is that the 6 to 8 week check has become the same check that you do the baby's first jab since COVID. So that means the mum's very focused on the baby and the fact that they're going to have pain and not feel brilliant, etc. And also that the doctors are also focused on giving the baby the jabs. So there's very little physical, if any, check for the birth mother. And so nobody's prioritizing it. The mum's thinking about the baby, and so is the GP quite often. Now, tellingly, they're not actually trained to check for, it's not part of their training. And I have been to coffee mornings where midwives have been present, and the senior midwife who is there with the trainee midwives has actually asked me to show her trainee midwives, because I'm doing abdominal checks at a mums and tums coffee morning, to show her girls, her nurses, how to do it, because it's not part of their training. So my campaign is hopefully designed to try and encourage NICE and the medical colleges to bring in these checks. Why? Because frankly, as this quote says, mothers are not a niche. They literally make all the people. I love that quote. It's slightly paraphrased, but we do make all the people, and yet the aftercare or the care postnatally to recover from having a baby is often quite poor. I mean, Nikki, you had twins, so you know how much it takes a toll on the body. So it's kind of just trying to get the medical profession, particularly those that set the standards like NICE and the medical colleges, to recognise this simple test could make such a difference. So the campaign is called For Crying Out Loud, and it's a campaign for progressive postnatal care. So it's not a criticism of the current, although it is. I don't word it as such. And the idea is to just get these checks introduced so that women are aware of it. And then the plan is to build on that into postnatal care beyond that, because actually we stay postnatal forever. We're always going to have a different body than we had before, and there are problems with that. So it's to work with things like women's reproductive problems. So many women have problems reproductively with their reproductive organs after giving birth and when they finish giving birth, and they're still waiting years for medical intervention for that. And I know that from personal experience. So we're looking for a greater emphasis on pre and postnatal training at medical school, to extend aftercare. This is key, I think, beyond 6 to 12 weeks and into the first year, so that postnatal depression and other medical issues resulting from giving birth can be picked up earlier, such as endometriosis. Make examinations for abdominal separation a prescribed part of the 6 to 8 week check. So again, as I said, for GPs and midwives to be comprehensively trained in how to conduct this simple test, but then to have a clear rehabilitation pathway to women who have found to have separated muscles. Because I believe the reason why the NHS is not looking at this problem at the moment is because they have no pathway. So we need to have, so a scary thought, but probably better controls in the fitness industry so that the NHS can confidently refer out, because the NHS can't meet the demand anymore. So there has to be people registered within, outside the NHS, but who have been passed by the NHS as being competent. Because the other thing is, I'm sure you'll all agree that not all certification that you need to work as a personal trainer or anything in that area is necessarily well policed. So some of it you can do a course in a weekend and claim you're a postnatal, prenatal specialist. So we need some controls on that. But I'm utterly convinced from the evidence I've seen that bringing in this simple check and extending postnatal care into the first year will eventually pay dividends in the long term and save the NHS money. And I don't think many can argue with that. When you've got women having surgeries for prolapse and you have the meshing scandal, you can see how, had they been fixed, had they been identified to have a problem earlier on, then that might not have been such an issue as it was. So what's the lowdown on abdominal separation? What are the symptoms? So I'm going to go into this a little bit more in a moment. I'm very aware of the time, so I won't go on too long. But you can see you have a separation if you look at your belly. It's an external visual as well, because your skin will be slack. There will be no tension there. And it sits funny. Sometimes even in the worst cases, you can actually see the separation, okay? You'll suffer from backache. You'll have no core strength, so your back, you will suffer. Poor posture. So again, all these things I keep on thinking, oh, hypopressives will sort that out. Pain, okay? They get pain. If you've got an abdominal separation, you will have back pain, you will have all kinds of pain going on in the abdominal area, and bladder issues. So may have, when you sneeze or cough, you may have incontinence issues. And the longer term risk is a prolapse. And of course, we know that hypopressives can fix the grade 2, even grade 3. Grade 4, grade 5 can be a lot longer program for them, but also sometimes only surgical intervention will finally make the difference. But we can get in early, get hypopressives working, and I've seen some amazing results, which I'll touch on later. So how big is a diastase? How do we measure it? So we usually measure it by finger width. So I'm going to look like I'm sticking my 2 fingers up at you. But so one finger is a centimetre. Okay, 2 fingers, 2 centimetres, 3, 4, etc. Okay, and we do it widthways. So we measure down here. I'll show you a bit better later, but we measure down like that. So a separation of 2 to 3 centimetres is outside. It's not really in the panic zone. It's very fixable, but it needs fixing. So a low pressure, regular exercise system like hypopressives that doesn't overload the rectus abdominis or the pelvic floor. Because the problem we've got is everybody thinks, oh, if my muscles aren't working properly, I need to do some crunches, some push-ups, some planks, some sit-ups. Those 3 things are the worst things you could do if your abs are not working properly. Okay, so they'll put the rectus abdominis under immense pressure because as soon as you bring pressure in, you've got that sitting in your abdominal cavity. Where's it going to go out? It's going to leak out of the weakest point. And your weakest point will be your pelvic floor, hence the prolapse, or your rectus abdominis, hence the growing separation. Okay, so think of a balloon with a hole in it. The minute you press around the hole gets bigger until it bursts, the balloon bursts. And so that's the kind of thing that's going on. Now, here we have a problem straight away because half of the cases, the mum's already got toddlers. Okay, so she's already lifting a load. Then you go and pick up a car seat. It weighs a freaking ton before you even put the baby in. I want the manufacturers to make it out of carbon fibre because carbon fibre is so light. We know it's safe because they make aeroplanes and cars out of it, but it's expensive. And unfortunately, nobody's kind of thought of it or decided it's practical. There's plenty of waste from carbon fibre that they could use to make car seats. So you've got a mum who's got a diastase, and I say to them, you can't lift heavy. They go, well, how am I going to get my baby into the car? And then they walk in with Brutus sitting in a car seat. You know, he weighs a freaking ton. Her husband is 6'6" and a wrestler, you know. And so she's got this great big baby. She's a little lady. So she's got the diastase because she had a big baby and she has a small frame. And she's lugging this. And I have my goddaughter, I've been helping her recover. And she has a 6'5" partner who's built like a wrestler. And she's 5'2" and really petite. And her baby son and now her baby daughter look like mini wrestlers. And that's what she's carrying. And that's what she was carrying around before she had them. And that's what she's carrying around now in a car seat or picking up and taking in and out of the bath the toddler. So it's a work in progress with her because every time we do quite well with the hypopressives and she goes and does something mad, but the hypopressives is kind of holding her in place. It's holding that closure. So those are the issues. I've gone off a bit. A 4 to 5 finger plus separation is considered severe, okay? And in these cases, the connective tissue is stretched and the core muscles are no longer able to provide the support that you need in the pelvic and abdominal region. So that's quite serious. In Singapore, before I had hypopressives, I knew of 2 of my clients who had to go in for surgical repair, okay? Now, even with hypopressives, that would have been a long program. And when I've worked with people who are 4 centimeters separated, sometimes we only get to 2 centimeters, and that's their closure because of the damage that was done. But what is imperative and really important is the fascia, the connective tissue underneath, is right up to that separation, which gives them the best possible chance of maintaining that closure so that they wouldn't ever tear or reopen. It's what I love about hypopressives is it's not a superficial closure, which crunches and everything gives you, which is, if you're lucky, they might close it up a little bit, but they will have not activated the fascia underneath at all. And more often than not, they will have probably have made the closure work, the opening worse. So what hypopressives does is get to the nitty gritty and it gets that fascia, that tissue, connective tissue back up. before you close. That's imperative. What you don't want is a superficial closure with no tissue underneath to support it. Okay, so this lady, I hope you can see her. Week 1, look at her. For me, the most important thing about this is posture. Exclusively hypopressives, this client. So she was 4 children in 7 years. And the reason I started my campaign was that the first week I saw her, I saw another lady with a prolapse who was 61, 4 children in 7 years, but had obviously had the diastase for 29 years because her youngest son was 29. She had a 5-finger separation. So both these women had 5-finger separations. And what it told me was that in 30 years, the checks hadn't improved because this lady was a year postnatal and had never been picked up. And neither had the lady who was 61 or 59, I can't remember her exact age. And both were presenting with the same thing. So my argument is, in 30 years, we've cured some cancers. We've got cures for other things, and that's fabulous. But we've still got the same shitty, sorry, there's no other word for it, care for these women who are not niche. They literally make all the people. And I've got 5 kids. Thank God I didn't give birth to the 5th one because I think I wouldn't have survived it. But I gave birth to 4 kids, very, very nasty, long labours. And, you know, we need looking after because we keep on adding that need to the population. Otherwise, there would be no people. So look at the difference on week 11. Just week 11. Now, she said hypopressives made her focus on what was going in her mouth as well. So there's a little bit of being careful about what she's eating. But look at that waistline and look at her posture, because for me, it's the posture. She hated herself when she came to see me. Her body had let her down. She felt like she was a shadow of the woman that she was when she first started having her babies. And she had lost all... She was depressed and she had lost all the love of herself. She had lost herself. By week 11, the difference in her whole personality, her whole persona was massive. And what I love about this picture is it shows her mental health, her mindset in the way she's standing, because she's proud. And 10 weeks later, I was invited to her 40th birthday party, and she was rocking it in this silver, dazzly, glittery dress, mini dress, and she danced the night away. And she said to me, she whispered in my ear, couldn't even have dreamt of doing this. I'd have bloody weed myself, if you'll excuse my language. So I thought, yeah, this is great. And I'll come to so it is the regular practice, as I've said here, that is the key to success. And it's the hardest bit. I know when these women come to see me that I can help them, but they have to help themselves. And sometimes that they want a pill, they want a magic wand. And so that is where the stories aren't successful. It's where they just won't do the homework. So it's about the practice. And this lady is still doing it today. She pings me, I'm just keeping it up. She goes, even though actually she's closed really nicely, she's got that little 2-finger gap, but it's really well supported, but she's not taking any chances. And I love her commitment. So she sends me a thumbs up every day she's done one. So yeah, so the red flags. I've already mentioned those. Lots of babies close together. Twins, I've mentioned Nikki. So twins, you know, several babies in a relatively short span. So like those 2 ladies I've just talked about. A large baby. I lived in Singapore. You would not believe the number of huge New Zealand rugby players who ended up marrying a tiny Singaporean lady. And then they'd have these huge babies. So I literally broke my experience on these tiny ladies who were having, they were like 5 foot, 5'1", and they were having these 9.5-pound babies, carrying these 9.5-pound babies. So I had so many diastases, it was difficult to know where to start. So that was a great baptism of fire for me, not so great for them, but a wonderful way for me to hone my art. And a traumatic birth, I think that's probably why I had one, because I'm not a small lady, but I did have big babies. But I spent 13 hours giving birth to them at a time. And so I had long drawn out labours. And that pressure as you're pushing to get the baby out can put real pressure on the pelvic floor, huge amount of belly pressure, and separate those muscles further. And then, of course, You can also it can also be an after pregnancy, not just during, because of the way the uterus stretches the muscles. Okay. And one study found, this is what I find really incredible, 60% of women may experience a DR during pregnancy or postpartum. Okay. And although it's an easy check, GPs are not trained to do it. Neither are midwives. In fact, very quickly, I'll tell you a story that really shocked me. One of my best friends here is a midwife, and we've worked together. I've shown her how it works. She's a big hypopressive fan. And she brought diastase checks in because I showed her how to do them. And she's now a senior midwife and she trains student midwives. And then one of the student midwives went to the senior midwife and said, "Why is Rachel showing me this test? Because we're not taught it in college." And so the senior midwife went back and said, "It's complicated things, don't do it anymore." So she was told she couldn't teach it to her trainee midwives anymore, even though they know they should be, because it complicates things because they don't have an avenue of what to do if they find they have them. So this is an issue that we're fighting at the moment. So what are the signs and symptoms? I mentioned about the tummy. You can have a bulge or a pooch or just a tummy. It can be above or below the belly button or all over. People tend to feel they've got like a bit of like a shelf, particularly like if you've had an abdominal incision, you can have a bit of a shelf. But if you haven't had one, you can feel like you've got one when you've had a vaginal delivery. You can have a ridge down the center of the belly. So in the worst cases, you'll actually be able to visually see it rather than just have to feel for it. And a soft jelly-like belly. So a lot of mums will come to me and go, "I just can't get rid of my belly." And it's 9 times out of 10, it's a diastase. It's not diet or anything. Doming or coning is one of the easiest ways to see it. But to do that, you have to do a sit-up or a crunch, and you don't want to encourage them to do that. Difficulty lifting heavy objects, that it makes them feel very heavy, and doing everyday tasks. So all the things we have to do as a parent. Low back pain because you've got, as I said, little abdominal support, and poor posture. Crucially, pain during sex. Now that's a bit of a bummer, isn't it? After you've had a baby, you don't really want that. So that's a downside to it. And hip or pelvic pain. So that's the other kind of pain from the pain I was mentioning earlier about the back pain. Bladder issues, I mentioned them briefly. Leaking when sneezing or coughing. Constipation is the other end of that scale, because again, you've got no strength to work with that, and no core strength. And of course, as I mentioned with that lady whose pictures you saw, mental health toll on people when they feel their body is no longer working as it should do, mixed in with postnatal depression as well, and the risks of that. What to avoid under all circumstances: jumping on the trampoline with the kids. This is my pet hate, okay? It is the worst thing you can do, okay? Because when you jump up and then jump down, you're going into a lowered surface, and your poor pelvic floor, which isn't functioning very well anyway, is going up and then down with no control, okay? So I had a client, we'd nearly closed her in Singapore, and she went on a children's trampoline at a party, and she tore, and she ended up having to have surgery, because once they tear, it has to be surgical because there's no connective tissue. It's gone. It needs to be repaired because the connection's gone. And that's a much bigger rehab after that. So yeah, so not a big fan of kids' trampolines. Stay off them. And lots of mums go to me, "Well, I can't go on one anyway because I leak." So then I'm going, "You need to come and see me because you need hypopressives." Avoid any exercises that forcefully contract the rectus abdominis against gravity. So that means sit up the crunches. We've already talked about them. Full planks, weights, heavy weights, because again, the first place you're going to put pressure on when you're lifting heavy weights is down onto the pelvic floor. High impact, running, jumping, etc. I had a client who was a triathlete, hates yoga, hates Pilates, physio in the hospital here, but knew she had this, she'd had this 13 years, I think it was, diastase recti. And she came to me in desperation. And I said, "Well, I'm sorry, but if we're going to work with this with hypopressives, you've got to give me a chance. You've got to stop doing your running. And you can keep doing swimming, but you can't do breaststroke. You've got to do overarm. I'll explain about that later. But here, I can bring it in. So breaststroke is not good. Breaststroke separates the abs. So if you've got a separation, everyone thinks breaststroke is the safe stroke. But when you've got a separation, all you're doing when you do that is separating the abs further. I didn't know that until a physio told me that, and then it all made sense. Do this as long as you're not holding your breath for too long and you're drawing the muscles up together. Okay, so if you've got to swim, it's overhead, not breaststroke. But so I stopped her doing her running. We got really good results. She was doing it twice a day because she just wanted to get it done. And then I said to her, you're holding back a bit. I think you need to stop your swimming now. So she was just doing her cycling. And we knocked it on the head. 8 weeks it took her to do that after 14 years. And she now comes on to, if I want to do a webinar, she'll come on as a physio saying that she's been through it. So it really helps to reinforce what we're saying when another medic professional comes on, or a medic professional rather, because I'm not, but another professional comes on and supports what you've done through personal experience. Okay, lifting children, that's the other big thing not to do when you've got a diastase. And unfortunately, it's impossible because 9 times out of 10, you've got kids. But that is also not great. So I always say to my clients, do not lift your baby, your toddlers out of the bath, help them get out, because that's one of the most vulnerable points when you're bending over the bath to pick up a child, or get your partner to help. If it's a baby, it's not quite so bad, but it's things like that in everyday living. So how do we check for a diastase recti? So I use this machine. Oh, it's wonderful. Lorraine, you'll know what this is. I love a circle. I saw a joke yesterday. Father Christmas was with this little girl and he said, what do you want for Christmas? And she says, I want a real dragon. And he says, oh, come on, be realistic. Give me something realistic. And she said, I wish my Pilates teacher wouldn't use the circle anymore. And he goes, okay, what color do you want that dragon to be? And I thought, yeah, that sums it up perfectly. So circle here under the head protects your neck or your client's neck when you want to check. You get them to lift up fractionally, so they're in control the whole time, because we need to see a contracted ab to give us a good measure, but we don't want them to do a crunch. So I call this a head lift, okay? So they're lying on the floor doing in the position that lady is in, but they have the circle. You can use a towel if you haven't got a circle, but this is like, my one's more expensive, but because it's body control, but you can buy these on Amazon for $9.99, $10.99. They don't have to be a great quality just to lift your client's head off the floor. So you get them to lift up and to breathe normally up here, not hold their breath. So they've only lifted to their lat muscles, so roughly to the bra line, and they can come down at any time, and you start feeling. But remember to give them a break because they do potentially have a diastase. You start feeling at the top here. So here, you start at the sternum because some people go all the way up. And you can feel a gap. There's a separation. If there's a separation, you can feel the muscle walls. And you measure it with your fingers going down like that or like that, hopefully not. And then you carry on. So let them rest for a bit. Bring them back up again and go further down. So we're feeling above the belly button. And then you can feel on the belly button. Now, the belly button's your weakest point. It's where the umbilicus is attached to the baby. So it's very much our weakest point. And 9 times out of 10, that's where the widest thing is, unless somebody's had a little bit of a tear. But sometimes, occasionally, you will see something that doesn't follow the rules, and that's fine. It's not fine, but you can deal with it still. And so it tends to be bigger around the belly button. Relax again. What you'll want to see is some sort of abdominal activation. If they've got no activation, you carry on all the way down to the groin, okay? And what you will find is the picture is a diamond shape because it's always bigger around that middle area. And then, so the area where my arrow is now, and narrower at the other bits, okay? That's the normal conformity, but not everybody conforms, of course. Keep letting them come down so they're not overstressing because you don't want to make the symptoms worse. And then you need to know the depth. So the depth is by knuckle or nail. So some people, they're really lucky. I can barely get the top of my fingernail in before I meet tissue. So when they're up in that position, you want to feel something against the tip of your finger. Sadly, some people can go down to the second knuckle. So that means they've got a gap, a depth of nearly my whole finger. Okay, and I usually use my index finger and my middle finger. So it's really useful to have those measures because you can see progress as well. So I always take pictures of their posture, so of them standing, because that's also one of the biggest visuals that you can see changing. And also I take pictures I tell them to take pictures of themselves in the mirror with their bellies, in their underwear, or get their partner to do it. So they have, which is what that other client did. So they have these visuals because nothing speaks more than a picture. Okay. And if I take pictures of them, I then send them to them, and in front of them, I delete them and ask them to keep the pictures themselves so we can see the progress. And that protects their privacy as well, obviously. So when you've done that, you've ascertained how deep and how wide it is, then you've got something to work with, and then they can physically see the improvements. And nothing speaks clearer of how brilliant hypopressives is when taught correctly and done correctly, practiced correctly, than change, physical change they can see. So I always say to them, do you want to have a quick feel? So they know I'm not talking this up. And I let them have a little feel themselves so they can see that this is exactly where we are. So that's transparency is really important. So we'll have a go at the end with that if you want to. So I've explained all of that. So that's how I'm very happy if you want to quickly break now and try and have a go yourself. Shall we do that just quickly now while we're still on that subject? And then very quickly, because I don't want to overrun my time and lose we need to have time for questions. I'll just quickly tell you how you can interact and share and grow your your contacts and everything. Quick one-page thing. So all of you lie down if you want to do this. And I'll just show you how to check your abs if you want to do it, or we can save it to the end and you can stay at the end. Shall we do that? We'll save it for the end. And if anyone wants to stay quickly and do that, I'm very happy to do that with you. Okay, so how do we grow our contacts? So that now we need to be prepared to do this for free. Okay, so that's how you start building it. So I do webinars online for doctors, and I do it for free, but I am going to build myself a CPD program so that I can start charging for it. But at the moment, as part of my campaign, I just want to get the message out there. So one of my clients is a GP. So she comes to my Pilates class. She had a separation. That's how she came to me first. We fixed her separation. And so she's a big fan. So if you can find people who need fixing, who are medics, that's perfect, because you can do the job and what your hypopressives will do the job for you. You've sold it to them. Okay, so that's how you can get your hypopressives out there. For the campaign, for being, if we were all to start being vocal about the need for these checks, working with GPs allows you to do that. So I did a webinar. So this GP is on a Facebook page for mums who are medics. And the first webinar I did on that page, 82 medics came along. And it was massive. I couldn't see them all, obviously. And I did a diastase and then an introduction to hypopressives, because I thought you've got to get in there with them. You've got to share that information. Don't be shy. I was very careful with my language. I didn't at any time criticize them for not doing the checks. And at the end, I got a ream of emails from people saying, medics saying, could I book an appointment with you? Because I think I've got a diastase. So they didn't even know they had them. And also other people saying, which I found really lovely, a couple of GPs, not all GPs, but quite a few were GPs. Some were surgeons and some were midwives. A couple of GPs after the first, I say a good handful, sent me an email and said, thank you for this. I am going to bring these checks into my postnatal checks. She said, one woman said, I'm going to have to ask permission because it's not prescriptive. So we have to ask their permission. So I only hope they will let me do it. So again, there's this risk that they won't know what it is. So the mums will say, oh, no, I don't need it. So the fact that these GPs now realise that how easy it is to check for, because I showed them how to do it, means that that they will do it, although they're leaving themselves slightly vulnerable because it's not prescriptive and it's not part of the NICE guidelines. So that's what we need to change. So you can offer free webinars to local practices. I've been needed to do my CPR for my PT. It's running out, and I can't find a CPR course that I can do as a refresher as a one person because I'm self-employed. So I went to this GP and I said, "Do you do any CPR classes for your partners and your staff?" And she said, "Yes, we've got one in January." I said, "Oh, can I join it? And I'll do you a free workshop for your GPs." And she went, "Oh, yes." So I've got a free CPR session. I'll be certified again at the end of it. And I'm doing a 2-hour workshop for them and getting the message out again. So, and building relationships. So that's building relationships. Nobody wants to pay anything to learn this information initially. So you need to start the ball rolling, make those connections, and then you can start making money from it. So the GPs who I worked with who had diastasis, I charged them. You know, they weren't offered that for free. They got the information for free. That's all they were getting for free from me. But you know, and then they were fixed. Physiotherapists, like the lady that I worked with, chiropractors and osteopaths, a lot of them become hyperpressive trainers. So you know, talk to them, tell them about hyperpressives. So I work with a chiropractor down the road who I've worked with some clients of hers and vice versa. We've cross-referred, and then we've seen the work that the other person's done, and so we continue to cross-refer because we admire what they do. Midwives, as I said, volunteer with your local MVP. So I am a women's health advocate. So I'm on the Maternity Voices Partnership for Harrogate. So this part of North Yorkshire. I went to a big conference I was the only non-NHS person in Harrogate in October, and I spread the word there in the little workshops. And then one of the ladies from Bradford asked me if I would come and talk at the Bradford Women's Health Conference about diastasis recti and hypopressives. And I was so excited. And then when she took it to the managers, they went, "No, she's self-employed. She's a business. We can't promote her." So they've knocked me back. So I've got to wait until my campaign is officially up and running. And then maybe they'll invite me back. But they penalised me because even though I'd have done it for free, because they can't be seen to promote outside the NHS. So that was a shame, but it's worth volunteering with your MVP, and then you will go out and spread the word that way and find clients. I run mums and tums groups that sometimes they hear about me through the MVP, and go to mums and tums groups, mums groups, go to toddler groups, offer to do free mummy checks. So, you know, do your learning, get comfortable doing postnatal checks. If you can, I heartily recommend that you do a pre and postnatal certification, because that can really bring the hypopressives into another area. And you're backed up by a credential, so that would help as well. I've done several of pre and postnatal qualifications, and offer free or cut price mummy MOT. Something I do randomly, I'll always have my business cards with me. If I see a mum in the street, she's got twins, or in a pub, I'm in a pub, I do sometimes go to the pub, and there's a mum there at lunchtime, not evening, with a baby, twins, with her husband, and I'm on the next table. Before I leave, I'll just pop over and I'll go, hope you don't mind me asking, do you live in Harrogate? And they'll go, yeah. And hopefully they'll go, yeah. And I say, could I just leave you my card? And they immediately think, what the heck? And I go, I'd like to offer you a free mummy MOT if you don't mind. I live just up the road. You'd be very welcome to come. I normally charge £40 for them, but I'd be really happy to give you one for free. You should find out whether or not you've got an abdominal separation because you've had a multiple birth. And unfortunately, your GP doesn't check for that. If you would like a free check and some exercises, so I give them an introduction to hypopressives, you can have that on me. Congratulations for your babies. Now, I've done that a few times and never had a response. And then recently the lady with twins got in touch. And then another lady I gave it to was struggling up the hill with her toddler and her baby, turned out to work as a PT. I worked with her. It turns out her boss is Rachel, the lady who won The Apprentice. And now I've got a conversation with her in January. So she's got 2 studios, one in Harrogate, just down the road from where I live, in the same street. And her PT has been telling her how I helped close her separation. And now she wants to talk to me about how I can work with her with that. So you do something for free, you get something back, is what I'm saying. So don't ever think it is for free. It's for a purpose, you know. And if you're passionate about something, you won't mind anyway. But I had no idea that helping that lady with the struggling two children up the hill would lead me to a connection that actually could be quite valuable for me, you know. So you know, Rachel has a great Instagram presence. You know, she's won the Apprentice this year. You know, she's an amazing lady. So yeah, so step out of your comfort zone and do something random, and you never know where it leads. So thanks for listening. That's me. Any questions?
Fabulous, Sam. Thank you so much for that.
Slightly overrun. Sorry, Nikki. 5 minutes.
No, that's absolutely fine. No one had to dash off, I don't think, anyway. And you can dash off because we're recording it. I wanted to talk to you about when you were kind of talking about rehabbing diastases. One of the sort of more traditional ways to help with closing abdominal separation alongside hypopressives is like wrapping, belly wraps. You know, so that and I know clients that have done a combination of hypopressives and used that as a support to help heal. And I just wanted to like talk to you about that and ask you what you think about. It's quite an old. It's like an old kind of. Oh, I don't even know where it comes back, but it kind of goes back in history to real.
It's actually from Asia. It's actually from Southeast Asia. So
Yeah.
I lived amongst it.
Okay.
And yeah, it's very common in Singapore. Women would wrap themselves after they'd had their baby. I think it's very much like there's two schools of thoughts. Okay, so if somebody has a very serious diastase and they're worried they're going to damage it, then by all means, if they're going to go and bath the kids, wrap. If they're going to go and lift something heavier than they want to lift, wrap. Do not. It's like with a running issue. If you wear a support all the time, what's the muscle got to do?
Oh yeah,
Absolutely
no, I know.
nothing.
But in terms of like just
Yeah,
giving them a bit of support, it's a bit
yeah,
like I get asked quite a lot about prolapses and pessaries.
yeah,
And again, that's a similar thing when someone's
yeah.
got lots and lots of symptoms and they're really aware of them. Often a pessary can be really, really helpful.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
they
Yeah.
then don't go and push the boundaries.
Yes. Yeah. No, I mean, I think pessaries is slightly different. The GP that I work very closely with, she now sends her clients indirectly, you know, just quietly to me when she puts pessaries. She says she spends 70% of her time now putting pessaries in women. That's a shocking statistic. But she says they couldn't function without the pessary. Okay. So what I say to them, I've just started working with a lady who's just had a pessary put in, and she said in 6 months she's going to have it checked and everything, or whenever it is. I forget when she said. And she said, I'm going to ask my GP. This is the GP that I was talking about. So she's come from that GP to have a look and see if there's any improvement. And if there is improvement, the GP won't put it back in. So because she'll know that there's enough support there for it to continue with the hypopressives and see how she goes. And then if it doesn't do the job without the pessary, they can look at putting it back in. But you know, as a PT, I mean, you know, you're a PT too, that and as a runner, I wouldn't run. I would use the support for the marathon, for the longer race, but I wouldn't train all the time with it, and I wouldn't wear it all the time if I had a knee issue or an ankle issue, because if there's too much support, then the muscle doesn't have to do anything. So it's that argument. Whereas with the women in Singapore, they would keep it on 24/7. And I'd go, no, please don't, because how are your muscles going to recover if they're not being used? You know, if something else is doing that job for them. So, you know, there's a bit mixed school of thought about them. I think they have their place, but not all the time.
Okay, so the other question I wrote when you were talking about getting in front of GPs would be, let's have this, you had the scenario where you knew someone, they came to you, or so you know, you don't know anybody, say you don't know anybody, what's the best way to go in? Is to actually go in and talk to a practice manager?
Yes, so that's how I initially did it. I mean, this GP came to me through a recommendation from another mum. So, you know, by talking to just other mums, sometimes it will, other GPs are mums as well, you know, GPs are mums. But yes, I would cold call in, and 5 years ago, they'd look at me and go, why would we want to do that? Whereas people are having the conversations now. What's really exciting is Scotland has just adopted a 10-year programme to improve
Also
women.
Wales.
Yeah, and Wales too. Was it Wales? I thought it was Scotland.
Wales.
Oh, Wales have just, yeah. So that's an amazing breakthrough. I think the Scottish Parliament's just done it as well, haven't they?
I know that Wales, because
Yeah, I think literally the Scottish Parliament has just agreed it. So that puts the England under pressure. And if that happens, that should be really that'll be really exciting. So there's more conversations going on now, and as that's what I'm hoping to start is more conversation. So we can all start that conversation. You know, I went and saw my consultant after my surgery, my hysterectomy. And when she commented on how well I was doing, I said, oh, I've been doing hypopressive since 2.5 weeks. And she said, what's that? You know, I used that as an inroad. And then she wrote it down. Have those conversations, bring it in with your GP. Just try and wheedle it in, you know. And when a GP says to me that I'm seeing, what do you do for a living? I go, I work with women's health. I help women recover from abdominal separations. And then you can just feel that, you know, if you've got the right person there, it'll pique their interest. So it's just like I said, if you go to some of these mums and toddlers groups, sometimes they're doctors, you know, they are everywhere. But definitely go into a practice and ask to talk to the practice manager. That's a good way in, yeah. And then do some volunteering for things and just see where it gets you in. Go and have a conversation with an osteopath, you know, with a chiropractor. See where you can cross over. I always do it as, I think I could send some clients to you because I work in, you know, and then you're beginning that conversation. But try and make it attractive.
Awesome. Bethy has had to go, so I will email. I spoke to you
Yes.
before we went on air about Bethia, who is also a bit like you, wanting to really push it forward. So we will have. I'll email her back and
thank you, Nikki. Yeah.
She says on here that she's also witnessed a link between hypermobility and disorders and diastasis.
Yes, that's a very good point, actually. Yes, for sure. Yeah, because of your movement in your pelvis as well, and also you've got much more movement in your muscular tissue. Yes. Yeah, it's a very good point. I should have put that one in as well.
Anybody that wants any information on hypermobility and how that affects kind of pelvic floor issues and the higher percentage of problems that you're going to get with hypermobile clients, then you want to have a look at the Bonnie Southgate recording that we did. It was one of the first ones. I think that was back in October, but it's in the UK Hypopressives Trainers Unite group, that one. So that's worth a look, because what she doesn't know about hypermobility is not worth it. Has anyone else that's here now got any questions that they specifically that have come up whilst Sam's been presenting? Anything they want to ask? I know you're all at different stages of your journey. Some of you are qualified, some of you not. So
are they clear about how to do the check? Did I get that across?
Yep, and obviously we show that in as one of the assessments within the course anyway, similar.
Of course you do, yes. So that's fine. Yeah.
Guys that are on the course will have seen that, and Lorraine is a physiotherapist as well.
Or Pilates and physio, I love that. That's a great combination. Yeah.
Fantastic.
I'm sorry if I went on a bit. I'm just so very passionate about the subject.
No, what you got across was very clear, and that's very apparent in the fact that we've got no questions.
Or they were bored stupid.
They were bored stupid.
I've got ADHD, so I concentrated really well then.
You did. You did do really well. Awesome. So if you want to hand the host back over to me.
I will. How do I do that? Just tell me.
Participants, and then wear it.
Yeah, that's right. Hang on. I don't know how to do that.
So go to participants.
Yeah, I'm in participants.
And then you'll find me, and then go to more. Click on more.
Hang on, I've lost you now. I don't know what I've done there.
Oh, I can reclaim anyway. Hold on.
Can you? Sorry, I don't know what I've done there. Yes, you've done it, haven't you?
I've done it myself.
Thank you.
That's it. I'm just going to check. No, Matilda says it was great, clear, thorough. Thank you so much,
Sam.
Thank you. Passion and enthusiasm. Fantastic. Well, thank you for joining. Carolina. I didn't see you there.
She came, I let her in.
Oh, I didn't
Yeah,
see you.
sorry, I was late. I sort of sat at the table going, oh yeah, my webinar is starting in 5 minutes, and then 10 minutes when I go, run. Sorry.
Happy to see you.
Yeah,
Did you
good to
enjoy
see you.
that?
That was brilliant, Sam. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you, Caroline.
I
Thank
really
you.
enjoyed that. Yeah, so at the moment we're not doing the whole charging for replays, so we just decided to put it all back out on free. So once this is uploaded and Shelley has done her magic and cut all this waffle up at the end, then
What are you saying?
no, you know what I mean. People don't need this bit on the recording.
No.
And then it will be in the group. And and if you want to catch up on any of them, just have a look in the group under the guides. You'll see any past trainings under the guides. Just get them out there as soon as we've sorted them. The last one I did 2 weeks ago myself just was a bit of team training, bit of Q&A. I forgot to record it to start with. And so it doesn't quite start at the beginning. So, but that one was quite a good one anyway. There was only a couple of people turned up, but it was a really good conversation. Actually, it was Aisha. Aisha was there, weren't you? Yes. Brilliant. Well, I will let you all get along with your evening. Thank you very much.
Can I just say, if anyone wants to find out more about the campaign,
Yep,
or they'd like to sort of lend themselves to that, the more we can have people having conversations, me on my own is not going to probably cut it. So yeah, I'd love to have more people.
How do people find out more about the?
It's on my website, so there's a details about it.
In the Trainers Unite group as well. Maybe put a link in.
Yes, that's all right. Can I do that? Yeah. So
people won't look for it. They'll just. What was that? About a couple of weeks later.
Yeah. No, that would be great. Yeah, I'd love that. And it's called for crying out loud, because that's what my mum used to say when she'd had enough of us. So we're saying enough. We literally make all the people
out loud, woman.
Thank you, Nikki.
It's lovely to see you guys. Have a lovely Christmas if I don't see you before. And
ditto to everybody.
Check out the schedule for what's coming next year.
Look forward to it. Thank you, Nikki.
Merry Christmas. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Nikki.
Bye.